Rachel Clark is a transgender activist who served in the U.S. Marine Corps. She joins me now in studio. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I want to get your impressions of this policy. How does this policy make you feel?
Well, I served for 8 years in the military in the United States, and it doesn't make me feel good that there's policy coming out on Twitter. I think that surprised everybody. That just erases military service for so many people, and not only active duty service members, but veterans as well. And I think it's a very disturbing thing to talk about. And up until this time, transgender people have been serving in the military for decades. Maybe not openly because they weren't allowed to, but at least as far as Obama went, trans people have been serving openly, and they are still doing so today. So it's kind of baffling what the motivation is around this.
What was your experience like? You were in the military for 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, I lied to get into the military because back then when they asked if you were, they would ask if you were a homosexual, and they included trans people in that narrative, and so my answer was no, knowing that, you know, I was definitely, you know, would normally mark yes to that question. And so, so it was criminalized then, and in fact it was criminalized all the way up until Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. And so this is a huge step backward for me in terms of advancement of rights, and LGBT rights especially.
From the operational perspective, do you have concerns about this?
No, in fact, you know, Canadian military, as an example, has had trans people serving for a long time. So has the U.S. military. There's never been any issues that I'm aware of. And the RAND Corporation came out with a report that said that trans people have a very nominal effect on military readiness. So my question is, where is the policy coming from? Why is the policy all of a sudden becoming a big problem today? And I think it's a part of a much bigger narrative, perhaps.
Well, the president has said it's about the high cost of providing medical care for transgender military people. Right. What do you say to that?
Well, what I would say to that is the Washington Post came out with a report today that said that the military spends 5 times the amount of money than they do on transgender health care on Viagra. So obviously they're caring about the sexual health or the, you know, of many of its military members, unless you're a trans person, and then we don't care about your health or your well-being. And so it's a bit hypocritical or disingenuous to say, you know, it's all about money, when it's really not about money, because they're spending so much money on so many other gender-related healthcare concerns. So, so I don't buy it at all. It's a very low-cost thing to do in a government that runs trillion-dollar military spending. It doesn't make any sense.
He also said that it was a disruption.
I'd like to know who's being disrupted. You know, there's not been, we haven't heard about this issue. We haven't heard about operational readiness. I know many people who still serve in the military and do so. They're trans people. Our Canadian military has many trans people in it, and it's not disruptive at all. No one has reported disruption or went to court for disruption or asked for anything. So it feels like histrionics to me, in a way, to say we have this big disruption that just simply doesn't exist.
Well, as you say, there are transgendered military service members already serving. There are they're active in Afghanistan right now. So what happens to them? How does that make you feel?
I'm concerned about the frontline soldiers, but I'm also concerned because his tweet was very aspecific. And one of the things that his tweet said is in no capacity in the U.S. military. And there's many people who work for the Department of Defense who are not frontline soldiers. They may be healthcare workers, they may be secretaries, or they may be CIA agents or whomever. Those people will also be affected, according to his tweet. Now, all the tweets haven't been fleshed out yet because we don't know what the policy is. It came out of thin air. I think people were surprised and kind of taken back by what he said, almost as if there was no plan to it. And so we don't know what the scope and the generality of it, but I'm assuming that he's meaning frontline troops serving who are transgender.
Now, we have a clip from Ash Carter. He's the former secretary, defense secretary for President Obama. I want to play that for you now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Americans who want to serve and can meet our standards should be afforded the opportunity to compete. We have to have access to 100% of America's population for our all-volunteer force to be able to recruit from among them the most highly qualified.
So that was last year.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I absolutely agree with him. We need to have 100% of our population to volunteer. Not everyone wants to volunteer to be in the military, but for trans people, it's a way out for many trans people. And I'll also point out that the U.S. military is the largest employer of trans people in the United States, by far. So there's a lot of trans people who rely on the military for their livelihood, to be able to serve their country, to do so with honor. And I think this is really disrespectful of the president to say, without using any data whatsoever, to just kind of just wipe that out and tell troops that they're not valid or they're not worthy of service. And I think, you know, he talks about operational readiness, but he's ready to take a whole bunch of troops out of the system, you know, and how is that operationally ready? And those troops are all performing well. So I don't understand what the concern is.
Rachel Clark, I really want to thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Rachel Clark is a transgender activist who served in the U.S. Marine Corps.